following presentation of Money's Crazy Mind has been pre-recorded for your entertainment. And now, let's enter the asylum.
You know, it's kind of comforting. It's kind of comforting that this is the one time of year where the veil between the spirit realm and the realm of the corporeal is at its thinnest. The festivals of Samhain and All Hallows Eve, which celebrate the macabre, charging that energy, allowing it to roam, breaking down the barrier. Energy, both positive and negative, flowing through our realm, charging the spirits trapped here, creating the blanket that will soon mark the end of the harvest, prepping it for the long, cold isolation of winter. You know, it's funny. About 15 years ago, a group of pissed off, like-minded, independent wrestlers were going to use a spot just like this to announce their intentions to create the systematic suicide and redemption of the indie wrestling business. They never got to cut that promo. But here I am, 15 years later, talking about a completely different kind of suicide or redemption. My own. For the first time in nearly 2.5 years, this show has zero support, zero backing. It's just me, on my own, once again. This moment right here could truly be the systemic suicide or redemption of Money's crazy mind. The All Hallows Eve Spook-Tacular begins now. Oh my God, that's how you start a fucking show, man. Welcome back into the asylum. We went a little bit old school this week with a lot of the ambiance, with a lot of the introduction, with a lot of... look at the fucking logo, man. I haven't used that logo in probably, what, 2 years? I don't even know, man. But here we are. You heard it in the intro. The veil between the spirit realm and the corporeal realm is most definitely at its thinnest. Let's cut the psych ward just a little bit. Just a little bit. But what's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the 2023 All Hallows Eve Spook-Tacular. Yes. And I gotta be honest, if you had asked me last Sunday night if this show was even still going to happen, I wasn't sure. And I'll tell everybody why I wasn't sure. Well, let's just let, it's Halloween, man. Let's let cats out of the bag, right? Actually, it's Friday the 13th, but you know what I mean. It's fucking spooky season. One of my favorite times of the year. And this past Sunday, I wasn't even sure what was going to go on. Those of you that know me personally and those of you that follow my personal Facebook page, you know what happened to me on Sunday night. So I'm sitting at home on Monday morning. I've got 3 or 4 different doctors telling me, do not go to work. Cool, got it, understand. No problem there, homie. And I was looking at the rundown for this week's show. And, all the notes that I have for this week's show. The Spook-Tacular. And yes, obviously you see there's a lot of things that are normally on a broadcast of this very specific show that do not exist this week. But I did promise this show. And this is probably the one show of the year that I always look forward to. And I said to myself this morning, because even up until this morning, I'm just like, do I really want to do this? But then I thought about it. I put the post out Monday night telling everybody the show's on. We're here. It's going to happen. The Spook-Tacular is still going to happen. But then Tuesday I'm at work and I'm thinking again, and I'm just like, do I really want to do this? And I said, fuck it. Finally this morning I said, you went out, you recorded the promo, and we're going to talk about that promo. Just do the show. So we're here, man. We're here. You see, I haven't gotten very far from where I shot that very particular promo. So let's talk about the promo. Obviously, as everybody knows, I'm kind of on a little bit of a break. And 15 years ago, and it's the reason why I'm wearing the ECW shirt. 15 years ago, me and a lot of my friends were fed up and we were pissed off with the state of the professional wrestling business. We were pissed off with the indie wrestling business. We saw a lot of things happening behind the scene in indie professional wrestling where we're just like, this is not for us. This is not what we want to be affiliated with. This is not why we got into the business. And we decided we were fucking pissed off enough that we were going to do something about it. And in a spot very, very similar to what you see behind me, and in a spot very similar to what you saw in that intro video, that was where we were going to announce that the way the indie wrestling business was running at that time was dead, and that we were going to redeem it from the inside out. We never got to record that promo for various reasons. Some of us left the business, and then I stopped hanging out with those people. Not because I made the decision to leave the business, or not because they made the decision to leave the business, but there were other more personal things that were happening behind the scenes in my life where I said, I can't be a part of this right now. I got to walk away. And I just felt like the vibe and the feel and the emotion of that particular promo fit what I was trying to do with launching this year's Spook-Tacular. Not having the support and the backing and the resources that I've had for the past 2.5 years. So, I mean, in reality, and with everything behind me failing, my health, most importantly, failing, I had every reason and every motivation possible to just sit there and take all of this shit that I wrote up for this episode, for the Halloween episode this year, and just go, fuck it. I'm not throwing away my notes, but I had every reason to, and I had everything behind me to sit there and go, this shit doesn't matter right now. Here, you know what? Here's what I'll do. Here's actually the promo that I wrote. Don't believe me? There it is, right? Oh, wait, I'm pointing it at the microphone. Like the microphone is going to show you what's written on the piece of paper. But here you go. There it is. Money's Crazy Mind, Suicide and Redemption. So there it is. This is the script for the promo that you guys watched at the beginning of this episode. Everything in me said that I should have done that. My health, everything was against me going into this episode. But I didn't turn my back and run. I said, fuck it. We're going to do this. This episode is going to happen, and I'm going to make it the best damn episode that I've done in a very long time. And that promo was the start of it. And then putting together that intro video was the next part of it. Wasn't that thing fucking badass? And I could have made it shorter than 5 minutes and 13 seconds. I could have. But then you guys wouldn't have gotten to hear the whole song of Dead Hooker with a Zombie Vibe by my guys in Big Ugly. And that was the main reason I did it. I said, I got to celebrate these guys for everything that the members of Big Ugly have done for me. Even before I was with that place I've been for the last 2.5 years, Big Ugly was there. And I want that, even though that band doesn't exist anymore, physically, I want them to be there in the future. And that's the whole reason why I'm doing this. And that's the whole reason why it even says right here on the rundown for the show, opening credits video, opening credits theme song, Dead Hooker with a Zombie Vibe by Big Ugly. And of course, I can't forget my guys in Psych Ward. So, Fright Night, a Halloween favorite here on Money's Crazy Mind. I just kept it there. But how is the show going to look moving forward if the show moves forward? Well, it'll be a lot of what you're seeing now. Old logo until I can get a new one. No sponsor scroll. No logo for that place I've been for the last 2.5 years. And let me just, I want to go on record with something, okay? Because I don't know who from that particular place might be watching. I'm not officially gone from that place yet. I'm on a leave of absence. But because I have integrity in journalism, ooh, that sounds a lot better. All right, so we'll leave it here. I mean, it's very clear I'm on a green screen. I've been on a green screen for a long time. I went out and bought my own, all that fun jazz. So, okay, this sounds actually really good. So we'll just leave this right here. Anyway, I'm on a leave of absence from that place. So, because I'm on a leave of absence from that place, this is a completely independent production of Money's Crazy Mind. So, I don't want to have any of that branding, any of that stuff. And that's not to say that I'm not thankful. And I'm not what's the word I'm looking for? But I'm not upset with the last 2.5 years. But there's been some things that have happened recently, and those things are very public. They've been mentioned on several shows on that particular network that have spoken about the issues that have happened. The main one being my health. And how I did not take the time out to try to take care of myself after what happened to me in June. And look what happened. I ended up back in the hospital this past weekend. So because of those things, I walked away. Is that to say that I won't go back? I don't know. I have to learn who I am. Post everything that happened. If that makes sense to anybody. But if I do decide to do a show, you're going to see pretty much everything that you're seeing right now. You're not going to see the graveyard background. No. That's for Halloween only. But there'll be a lot of these, you'll see probably the old logo until I make a new one. Obviously, the recorded in Spook Central, all of that, that'll all still be here. I just won't be mentioning certain places and certain things. I do have to give another quick shout out before we get into the nuts and the bolts and the meat and the taters of this Halloween Spook-Tacular. But I have to give a shout out, obviously, to Riley Chase and the team over at Tattoo Therapy Inc. and the Erie Art Gallery for their continued support of Money's Crazy Mind, even though now we are solely a nameless, faceless production. Rye, it means a lot, and I hope you know. Hope you know that, buddy. I love you, man. I gotta come see you here soon. All right. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show. The rumors about Triple H and Stephanie McMahon's divorce have finally been put to an end. And it's all because of big sexy Kevin Nash that those rumors got squashed. So on Nash's podcast, he comes out and he's just like, hey, I got to share a text message exchange that I had between myself and Paul Levesque, Triple H. Obviously, he calls him Paul because they're friends in real life. And he just goes, hey, man, everything good? Anything you need to talk about? I'm here for you, buddy. And Hunter's just like, yeah, man, everything's good. Why? What are you hearing? And, basically, it was just, well, I'm just, hearing some news, man, and just trying to clarify what's going on. News? What news are you hearing about me now? He goes, I love hearing news about me. I goes, well, apparently you and Steph are getting a divorce. You and Steph are getting divorced, man. What, any truth to that? And he goes, oh, really? Wish I had known Stephanie and I were getting a divorce, because then I wouldn't have to be sitting here at this fucking JV football game watching my fucking daughter cheerlead for this fucking game. He goes, man, I wish somebody would have told me I could have gotten out of family time. Fuck, man, when's somebody going to tell me this shit? So there you have it. There you have it. Even Triple H is sitting here going, man, I really wish people would just leave my name out they fucking mouths, man. So there it is. I was proven right yet again. The Triple H and Stephanie McMahon are not getting divorced. Who would have figured? The hopefully very soon here, not so fat guy with a fucking microphone and camera, had it right the entire time. Who would have thought? All right. But as we normally do every year with this Halloween Spook-Tacular, we talk about specific things. A couple of years ago, we did some of the most haunted places in Ohio and the United States. We've done some of the best Halloween movies that aren't necessarily Halloween movies. We've broken down the Halloween film franchise from best to worst. We've done all kinds of stuff for Halloween over the years here on this show. This year is no different. Except this year I wanted to do something more me, as you could say. Now, obviously, talking about the haunted places and things like that, that is all me. And I don't have any problem talking about that kind of stuff. But this year, what I wanted to do was I wanted to look at some of the more iconic anthologies that are out there, or franchises that are out there in the horror realm, where the movies were not released in order. And what is the proper order for those film franchises? And what I want to do is I want to look at what one website, one pretty reputable website, I'll even put it that way, had to say was the proper chronology for these particular franchises. And then I take a look at their chronologies and I say, do I agree with this? Or do I think that there's a different way that you can watch these films? Now, mind you, this is just the opinions of both this particular website and myself. You do not have to buy into this. Create your own assumption. That's what we're all here for, man. Create your own assumption. But the anthologies that we're going to look at, or franchises that we're going to look at, is Alien, Paranormal Activity, The Conjuring, Insidious, Saw, and after I made this list up, I decided to add one more, Final Destination. Wait a minute, I think some of you are thinking, wait, what? Wrong sound effect. Wait, what? How did Final Destination make the list? We'll get into that. So the website that I'm using here to talk about these anthologies is movieweb.com. And as I said, I wrote down the order that they have for the chronology, and then underneath that, here is what I feel the anthology, or order, chronology, I should say, for that particular film franchise is. They're not really anthologies. I think I just used the wrong terminology there. But that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. So how did this happen? How do these films be released out of order? Well, let's think about it. nobody goes into any film thinking it's ever going to have a sequel. Sequels only happen in the case that the film has been successful. So, I mean, one of the names on this list here, Alien. We're talking about a film from 1978. They never anticipated that move to scare the shit out of people so much that we needed a second film, let alone a third or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth or a ninth, for that matter. I just counted. Potentially a 10th, because there's supposedly another film coming out. So when you go into these things, you don't anticipate it. You don't anticipate any reason for these films ever being released out of order. But then as the series moves on and the franchise continues and moves on, you end up running into issues where it's just like, well, where do we go from here? Why don't we go back to before the original film and let's sit there and say, this is how everything happened. This is how things were created. If there's time, I may even throw in another franchise that I just thought about. Horror Roots kind of became an action film in the later versions, but we can definitely bring it up here. Horror Roots, as I said. And there's even a few that I don't bring up, only because we know how the retconning of that particular franchise went. But we can talk about, if there's time, we might even mention it. So, all right, but here we go. Let's kick this off with the Alien franchise. So, the chronology according to MovieWeb.com. You start out with Alien versus Predator, Alien versus Predator Requiem, Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and then Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection. So do I agree with this chronology? No. Not at all. I changed things around quite a bit because I do think that you kind of put yourself into a little bit of a pigeonhole with some of the way that they have this chronology. Now let's think about it. Their first film here is Alien versus Predator. Well, that's the assumption that the xenomorph and the Predator alien have both already been created. But if you look at a film like Prometheus, in Prometheus, we don't ever see a single xenomorph. Not until the very end of the film. And then that's the same with Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant is still a very early, very immature version of the xenomorph. Now, obviously, a lot of that stuff takes place in a different galaxy. A lot of that stuff takes place in areas far, far away from Earth. So there's no reason to sit there and say that Prometheus and Alien Covenant don't take place before Alien versus Predator. Now, I didn't even want to include Alien versus Predator on this list, but they do involve the xenomorph, which is the alien baddie in the Alien franchise. So they're there, but we don't have any kind of origin story for the Predator alien. So we just have to assume that the Predator alien has already been existing wherever the hell it's at. And obviously, because of these two movies, we know that the Predator species does in fact hunt the xenomorph for sport. So it's safe to say that somewhere, somehow, in between Alien Covenant and Alien versus Predator, the xenomorph got transported to the planet where the Predator exists, or the Predator came to the planet where the xenomorph exists, which makes sense seeing as what we see in Alien Covenant. And obviously there was supposed to be another film before Alien, or after Alien Covenant, that never happened because Alien Covenant sucked. To some people. I actually like Alien Covenant quite a bit. So that kind of shows you where mine kind of starts. So we go Prometheus, Alien Covenant, Alien versus Predator, and then Alien versus Predator Requiem, And then obviously we know that Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection take place years in the future from those events. So it's safe, it's very safe to assume that you can put those in that order because the character of Ellen Ripley hasn't even been born yet with the events in Alien versus Predator. So you can definitely do that and definitely make that work. Now, whether you guys agree with that particular assumption or not, cool, fine, whatever. You don't have to. That's just my way of putting these things in this particular order. And obviously, a lot of people don't like Prometheus or Alien Covenant. Like I said, both films were kind of failures in their own respective right. But they do kind of tell that origin story of the xenomorph. So that's the only reason why all of these were included, and I included them in the order that I included them in. Up next, probably one of my favorite horror franchises that exist out there. Some people kind of don't like it, and they say they're like, "Oh, it fucking sucks," and found footage sucks, and grow a fucking dick, okay? These films were actually very fun. Were they well done? No, but I mean that's kind of the allure of the found footage franchise, or the found footage genre, I guess you can say, is because you can sit there and you can say, you can make a very decent film for very little money. And that's always kind of been the draw and the allure of the found footage genre. And I'm sure some people are probably going to sit there and be, oh, God, he's talking about that fucking Blair Witch again. Well, nope, you're wrong. Not Blair Witch, but Paranormal Activity. This is a film franchise where the chronology is so fucked up. You can probably come up with 9 or 10 different ways of watching this and having it still kind of fit the flow of the films as they were released, as the story needs to unfold. So obviously, you can kind of fit the order that they go in based on their titles for like a standard release. So obviously, it's Paranormal Activity, Paranormal Activity 2, Paranormal Activity 3, Paranormal Activity the marked ones, Paranormal Activity 4, and then Paranormal Activity the Ghost Dimension, and Next of Kin. Those are the films in the order that they were released. Yes, the marked ones technically came out before Paranormal Activity 4. So, Paranormal Activity 2 takes place before Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity 3 takes place long before even Paranormal Activity 2. The marked ones kind of falls in between Paranormal Activity 1 and 2. And then 4, Ghost Dimension, and then Next of Kin kind of finished out the end of that story. So, how does MovieWeb say you should watch these films? Well, they go Paranormal Activity 3, Paranormal Activity 2, Paranormal Activity, Paranormal Activity 4, Paranormal Activity the marked ones, Paranormal Activity the Ghost Dimension, and then Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. So do I agree with this? Yes and no. The placement of the marked ones can technically go, like I said, anywhere before Ghost Dimension. Because there's moments of the marked ones that take place after Paranormal Activity 4. But because of the events of the film that happen, it takes you back in between the events of Paranormal Activity 1 and Paranormal Activity 2. If you've never seen the films, I don't want to give anything away. But obviously, there's a particular event that happens that puts the events of Paranormal Activity 2 before Paranormal Activity. But then obviously the end of Paranormal Activity 2 goes after. And that's kind of why I say I agree with this, but I don't agree with this. Because the marked ones is kind of one of those films where it's like you can like I said, you can throw it anywhere and it makes sense. But the same also goes with Paranormal Activity 1, 2, and 3. You can watch them in any order you want because there's always that little piece at the beginning, except for Paranormal Activity 2. Well, even Paranormal Activity 2, yeah. Where it kind of sits there and says, this happened, but this happened before it. And Paranormal Activity 3 is the same way. You kind of see a moment from Paranormal Activity 2, and then it takes you way back in time. But here's how I put them in order. Here's the way I like to watch them when I do a binge-a-thon of Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity 3, Paranormal Activity 2, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, Paranormal Activity 4, Ghost Dimension, and then Next of Kin. Marked ones have characters that show up in an event that happens at the end of Paranormal Activity 1, and that's why I place it here. And that's why I don't want to... Here on my notes, I actually wrote the moment, but I don't want to reveal it here on this episode, just in case nobody's ever seen the Paranormal Activity movies, but they want to. There's another reason why I really like Paranormal Activity, and I think what I want to do for kind of the rest of this list here is I kind of want to say why I like these franchises. So we'll go back to Alien just for a quick second. Obviously, in space, no one can hear you scream. And you take the idea of a haunted house film and put it in a fucking spaceship. That's basically the original Alien. And plus you have Sigourney Weaver and a lot of other great actors in that Alien film. But Ridley Scott was so good at increasing the terror as the moment goes on. And the other great thing about it is you're in space. And I think Ridley Scott kind of put that into his head, and he's just like, there's no music in space unless you're playing music. So the score in Alien is very, very minimal. And I think that also adds to the terror. And then, of course, Cameron with Aliens, who... Do I really need to go any further into that? Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, obviously those movies are kind of wishy-washy. But Alien vs. Predator was an okay flick. Alien vs. Predator Requiem kind of redeemed that part of the story a little bit. Prometheus, I dig Prometheus quite a bit. Same with Alien Covenant. My thing with Prometheus and Alien Covenant is it's Ridley Scott. And Ridley wrote those films instead of just directing it. I think if he had brought somebody else in, somebody that's familiar with the Alien franchise, which obviously he is, he directed the original, but he didn't write it. So his version of the Alien origin stories, which is what Prometheus and Alien Covenant was, I don't think he had a fix on it. And that's my only issue with those films. But for Paranormal Activity, for somebody that believes in Paranormal Activity and believes that ghosts exist and do walk in this realm, those movies are just fucking terrifying. And they're good. I didn't mean to scare myself there with Psych Ward starting up, but I muted it, so we're not going to hear it anymore. I totally forgot that was playing, because this is normally the first shot of the show. I just wanted to go back to the other picture from the cemetery. So they tell one singular story. Unlike some of the Alien movies where, obviously Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection, they're all kind of telling that Ripley story, but they all take place in different areas, in different worlds, at different times. Whereas with Paranormal Activity, you're basically following the event of one family and one family's decision that brought a demonic presence into this realm. And that demonic presence has had its own agenda for a very long time. And at the end, it even ends up betraying the family that brought it here. And then it decides it wants to do it again with Next of Kin. But I love these stories because of the simplicity of it. Or I love these movies because of the simplicity of them. My only downside to this whole franchise is what they tried to do in Ghost Dimension. You get to see the activity for the first time. I never needed to see it to know what the hell was going on in these movies. And the only reason they even did that was because 3D was a gimmick at the time, and they wanted to bank on it. So they released Paranormal Activity 6, The Ghost Dimension, in 3D, and they were showing like all these dust particles flying around your face, and you can see like the tunnels that lead into the demon world and all this other crap. And I'm like, no, stupid, too much. Keep it simple. That's what I like about these found footage movies, because now by adding in all that crap, you take away the found footage feel of it. But that, again, very, very minor. But that's my order. I'll go over it one more time. Paranormal Activity 3, Paranormal Activity 2, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, Paranormal Activity 4, Ghost Dimension, and then Next of Kin. Now, for Next of Kin, I don't think they ever did a physical release of it, but it is available as a Paramount Plus exclusive. And the movie's actually not that bad. I like what they were doing with it, and I hope that story gets to continue. But moving on, and this one's going to be a little bit of a long one, and that's the Conjuring universe. Why am I a fan of Conjuring? I love the Conjuring because you get to hear, the main Conjuring stories are the actual case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, two of probably the most renowned paranormal investigators of any generation. They pretty much defined modern day ghost hunting. Do I believe that Lorraine might have been a medium and a little bit psychic? Maybe. And there's a few other things about Lorraine Warren that I may not believe wholeheartedly, but the woman has earned her stripes. And these stories that they're telling are, like I said, taken right out of their case files. So, as it stands today, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They don't have the Nun 2 on this list because at the time the Nun 2 did not come out. So I'll tell you where the Nun 2 is technically supposed to fit in the timeline. But the way that Movie Web has it listed is The Nun, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle, The Conjuring, Annabelle Comes Home, The Curse of La Llorona, The Conjuring 2, and The Conjuring 3. So where does The Nun 2 fit into this? Well, The Nun 2 would fit into this, and there's a couple different spots you can put it. You can put it right after The Nun, because this supposedly takes place not too long after the Nun story. Or you can put it after Annabelle Creation, because that story also takes place very long in the past, just as the way that the Nun does. But supposedly, like I said, according to everything that I know about the Nun 2, it falls right after the Nun. So that's probably where I would put it. Do I agree with Movie Web's list? Yes. There's not very many ways that you can do this differently. I mean, obviously, you can take the Annabelle trilogy and you can watch that in its own right. You can take the Conjuring trilogy and you can watch that in its own right. So those are probably the only two differences that I would probably do with that. Now, the Nun obviously now has two installations. So you can do Nun 2, and then Annabelle Creation, or Annabelle Creation, Annabelle, and then Annabelle 2, or Annabelle Comes Home. But then you have this weird floater in The Curse of La Llorona. But if you look at the Warrens' files, now obviously Annabelle Comes Home and Annabelle Creation, I don't know if those come from any real files of the Warrens, but obviously the story of Annabelle does, because that movie actually talks about how the Warrens came into possession of Annabelle. So you can kind of look at it that way. But obviously for The Conjuring 2 and The Conjuring 3, there's nothing that falls in between those two. So you can do The Conjuring 2 and then The Conjuring 3, and those would fall into order. And then once The Conjuring 4 comes out supposedly next year, then you can put that right underneath. So finally, we have one that I actually kind of agree with. Now, you can split it up any way you want. Like, if you don't want to watch the Conjuring movies, but you want to watch the Annabelle movies, obviously you can do that. Or if you want to watch the Conjurings without watching any of the other filler stuff, you can do that as well. So, as of right now, the Conjuring story is a trilogy until next year when the next Conjuring film comes out. Supposedly, that might be the last as well, because from what I'm understanding, it's going to be called Last Rites. So that'll be interesting to see. And with Patrick Wilson, getting into directing, there might be something to that effect too. Speaking of Patrick Wilson, I wasn't sure if I wanted to get into this or not because we're about 10 minutes away from break. Well, here's what I'll do. I'll share my reason of why I like this franchise. And then we'll cut to break. And then we'll come back. And we'll talk about the next couple here on the list. So page 1 is done. We are now on to page 2. So this next franchise that I looked at is one that actually just recently had a new piece added. And it's also a franchise that I didn't anticipate a new piece being added. Especially when you know the people involved. And actually that same kind of scenario falls into the next two franchises that we're going to look at. And shockingly, the same creators of this franchise of these franchises are exactly the same. So it's kind of interesting that I put them on the list that way. So the next two franchises that we're going to look at are Saw and Insidious. So how do they fit together? Well, Saw, at least the first 3 films, were written by Lee Wienell. Lee Wienell plays Specs in Insidious. But he also wrote all of the Insidious movies. James Wan directed Saw 1. And he's been executive producer on every Saw since. Same with Lee Wienell. James Wan also directed all of the Insidious movies, but the most recent. So that's how those franchises fall into each other. They have the same creators. Jigsaw and the Lipstick Demon were both created by Lee Wienell. And obviously, as you can tell, Lee Wienell kind of has a affinity for wanting to act in his own films, being that he played Adam in Saw 1 and that he's played Specs in every incantation of Insidious. Now, I have not finished The Red Door. I did start it, but I have not finished the last film in the Insidious franchise, but I do want to finish it. What I saw of it was very, very good. And Patrick Wilson does a great job of directing while even acting in the film. So, Insidious for me is again a very similar liking of the franchise in this kind of the same way that I like Paranormal Activity. Simple stories, cheap budgets, but obviously Insidious is not found footage style. but it's just really creepy writing. And obviously, I'm a fan of Lee Wynell's. Seeing as I'm also a fan of Saw. So I'll kind of just break down both of those here so that we can just get into the list and then we can talk about Final Destination as the final one. But for me, I really got into Insidious because of the way that they made those movies as scary as they did, but still managed to keep them PG 13. That to me is something that is very, very rare in the horror genre. A lot of times, the PG 13 horror movies are not that scary and they're not that well done, in my opinion, because I think they try to push that PG 13 just a little bit too much to put it almost into the realm of an R. Insidious doesn't do that. Insidious knows where it fits, and it says, this is PG 13. This is what we can do with PG 13. Let's make it as scary as fucking possible without pushing that envelope into R. And they do it very, very well. And that lipstick demon is probably one of the most creepiest things I've ever seen in my life. But on top of the lipstick demon, then you also have the guy with the fucking mask, the fucking oxygen mask, and you know, the wheelchair and the from the third one. Yeah, chapter 3. Where you just sit there and go, what? No. No. Creepy as fuck, motherfuckers. But then you also have the Black Widow, I believe is what, I don't know what she's called. I know she's called the Widow, but I think she's also called the Black Widow because she wears black. But most widows do wear black. But you have that character from Insidious Chapter 2 where you're just like, stop with the creepy fucking people, man. Like I said, I haven't really finished Red Door yet. So I know that the lipstick demon does come back in that one because that's kind of like the final part of that story with that family, the Lambert family. Last Key also had the creepy fucking demon with the key hands, and you kind of figure out how their like the woman in that saga is very similar, in my opinion, to like a Lorraine Warren. So that's their version of Lorraine Warren. And, you know, that's kind of her story and how she finalizes her story, even though, you know, well, never mind. I don't want to get into it. Because if you haven't seen the Insidious movies, you're missing some great, great films and some great content in that Insidious franchise. So we'll talk about Saw here real quick. And the only reason why I'm doing that is because, like I said, Lee Wynell and James Wan were responsible for Saw. You know, Lee Wynell wrote the first 3, but James Wan directed the first one, but they also directed every version or every film in Insidious except for the final chapter, The Red Door, which was directed by Patrick Wilson himself. But Lee Wynell did write it. So Saw. Obviously, Saw has gone through some changes over the years since the original. But Saw 1, 2, and 3 were very similar. You know, and it was the story of this man, John Kramer, Jigsaw. And you go into the first one and you're kind of just like, what are we looking at here? Like, the first one wasn't as much torture porn as some of the other ones became over the years. Saw became known for its elaborate traps. But for me, the first film was just a very like, what are we looking at here? Who is this Jigsaw guy? And you know, obviously you find out why as the movie's going on, why Adam and Dr. Gordon are being tested by Jigsaw. But what you don't think is going to happen is what happened at the end of that movie. And I don't want to spoil it just in case anybody wants to go out there and watch Saw, which if you haven't seen at least the original Saw, you're missing out on a great film. Hands down, period. And then you get to Saw 2, and John Kramer's a very different person, and you're like, but it also introduces a lot of new characters that are going to push that narrative throughout the next couple of films. And yes, believe it or not, the Saw franchise is very out of order. But with that said, we got about 2 minutes here before we cut to break. So I'm going to finish up my love, why I love the Saw franchise the way I do. And then we'll go to break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about Insidious and Saw and in what order I think or how Movie Web has these orders and do I agree with them. All right. But for me, Saw, they're just, I got into it for the Jigsaw story, the story of John Kramer. And then as the movie goes on, you find out that there's more and more characters that are involved in this that you never would have anticipated. And you kind of have to figure out the end of those characters. Like, okay, where does this go? For me, it's not so much about the torture porn aspect. It's about the narrative that ends up getting told and how this one person influenced all these other people in his life. And people that weren't even in his life, but people that ended up being in his life. And with that, we are going to go to break. For break, you saw it in the opening credit theme. We are going to be playing Behead the Prophet's single, The Calling. Money's Crazy's Mind will be right back after these messages.
Yeah, the sound Oh wow, that sounds really great. Wow, that sounds like a really good deal.
Who are you talking to?
The Northeast Ohio Ghostbusters.
Hello, Northeast Ohio Ghostbusters. What are you wearing?
Khakis?
Well, that sounds hideous.
Well, they're Ghostbusters.
And we are back. Get the psych ward warmed up and ready to go there. Forgot that I muted it because I wanted to go back to that scene earlier in the show. Alright. Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Money's Crazy Mind. All Hallows Eve Spook-Tacular. We're chilling in the graveyard. And you know, there's another reason why that promo was done the way it was done, right? And it's because, believe it or not, Ohio has weird rules about shooting in cemeteries. And unfortunately, basically, it's so that's why we did it the way we did it. But you know, this is kind of a new chapter for Money's Crazy Mind, with me not being associated with where I've been the last couple of years. So this is kind of a new dawn for Money's Crazy Mind, even though it's nighttime. But obviously, a few things have not changed, and that is the partnership with Tattoo Therapy Inc. and the Erie Art Gallery. And I do want to mention some things that the Tattoo Therapy Inc. and the Erie Art Gallery have coming up. Obviously, today's Friday the 13th, and they were fully staffed, and they have out-of-state artists that were coming in to help with Friday the 13th flash sale. That is still going on for a little bit here if you want to make the rundown to Tattoo Therapy Inc. But also, they're going to have their annual anniversary Halloween party and Erie art show and tattoo flash sale on October 28th. Tattoo Therapy is also the Erie Art Gallery at the same location, 3,600 square foot multi-studio and art gallery. If you didn't know, we moved to the big location in the same plaza. Please join us for a costume contest, prizes, help vote for awards, raffles, live entertainment, art, tattoos, food and drinks, and spooky good times. The flash sale is going to be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. First come, first serve. And the art show Halloween party is at 7 until whenever they decide that they're done. Any interest in having art in the show, please contact Julie Reminick, Zelda Elena Putnam, or myself, Riley Chase. Submissions must be in by October 15th, so you got 2 days left. There will be 3 different categories of awards for the art. There is a $5 cover charge to get into the tattoo or to the Halloween party. It's going to feature local artists, costume contest, entertainment, refreshments, and more. Follow them on Facebook for more details. Tattoo Therapy Inc. Under 18, welcome, but must be accompanied by an adult. So where's all this happening? Well, it's happening at the Tattoo Therapy shop and also the Erie Art Gallery shop at 6251 Pearl Road in Parma Heights. So that's a big event that they have going on every year. And I do know that Redline Radio will be there with some of their shows. And I think I don't know what shows I hadn't heard. I was invited to take a part in that, but obviously, with me taking the leave of absence, that kind of put a damper on that. But I might make an appearance to support Riley and to support Tattoo Therapy Inc. I will obviously be posting here on the Money's Crazy Mind Facebook page if that does happen. I have a few people I need to speak with about that before I make that particular decision. Because obviously, if I'm going to go for the party. But I want to make sure that a few other people might have the availability to attend it with me if I do decide to go. Not because of who's going to be there, just because, like, if I'm going to go, I want to have, obviously some of my friends and obviously my wife and people like that there with me. So stay tuned for more information on that. Now, tomorrow night, I will be making an appearance at the Harvest Saloon in Strongsville. Four Loco is doing a concert there, and I will be there for that. So if you guys want to hang out with me and Four Loco, the singer of the band that you heard open the show, Big Ugly, is the singer for Four Loco, Tony. I'm sure I've mentioned that multiple times. And also the drummer for Behead the Prophet is also the drummer in Big Ugly. So some correlation there as to why I like promoting some of those bands. Psych Ward, obviously they've been with the show from the beginning. Yes, even though I'm no longer with Redline Radio at the moment, I already said their name once, might as well just say it again. I will still be using Funny Bone. This being the Halloween special, I wanted to do that special theme song because why not? So that's just some things that I have coming up. So obviously tomorrow night, Harvest Saloon for Four Loco. The 28th, I might possibly be at Tattoo Therapy Inc. for their annual anniversary party and also the Halloween party. If you remember, myself, Money's Crazy Mind, and the Lex Vegas show were live there last year at their grand opening. So it's kind of cool that that's kind of coming full circle. But let's get back into this here. Let's dive back into these film franchises and whether or not I agree with the order that they have these in. Before we went to break, we were talking about two different franchises, both with the same creators, and that was Insidious and Saw with Lee Wynell. So we'll start with Insidious. They have less movies than Saw does. But the Insidious franchise, according to MovieWeb.com, goes Chapter 3, The Last Key, Insidious, Chapter 2, and then The Red Door. Do I agree with this list? Yes. The films are very good at informing you where they fall in the timeline. Lee Wynell does a great job with this series. So, for a while, what was the last two films in the franchise are actually the first two films that tell the story. So, Chapter 3 is the first time that you get introduced to this to the psychic character. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I want to say it's Elise, but I might be wrong about that. And it's kind of her getting into the story of the Lambert family, which is the family from the first two films. The Last Key falls in between that. So where Chapter 3 ends, The Last Key starts, and then it goes right into them getting involved with the Lambert family. So it's also kind of, how her Specs and I can't remember the other guy started their little business. And Last Key is kind of her character putting an end on her personal story, which there is some of her personal story that goes into chapter 3. And then the last key is her putting the last key into her story so that she can go and help the Lambert family. And then Insidious, and then Insidious chapter 2, and then The Red Door is the finalization of the Lambert family story. So I definitely agree with the way that Movie Web has this, and Insidious does a great job of letting you know that this is the order that the film's going, and they even say it right on the back of the fucking case. So I didn't even really need Movie Web to tell me the order that those movies went into, but because I did Movie Web with all these other franchises, I'm going to keep the Movie Web train rolling. Now, Saw. Saw is a weird one. There's a lot of different ways that you can watch the Saw movies. And I started thinking about this when I was putting my list together. How would I want to watch this franchise if I was going to watch it in some kind of crazy order? With Saw, you can kind of get away with watching it in order. Saw, Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4, Saw 5, Saw 6, Saw the final chapter, Spiral, Jigsaw, and then Saw 10. Or you can kind of watch it more in a chronological order to, get the full gist of the story of John Kramer, which is who this is about, minus Spiral. So Movie Web, I thought, kind of had this in a weird order. So obviously you can kind of tell I don't agree with Movie Web's list here for Saw. So, Movie Web, so far we're 50-50. Didn't agree with their take on Alien, but I did agree with their take on The Conjuring. Did not agree with their take on Paranormal Activity, but did agree with their take on Insidious. So here we go with Saw. Movie Web has Saw's chronology listed as follows: Saw 4, Jigsaw, Saw, Saw 10, Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 5, Saw 6, Saw the final chapter, and then Spiral. I have a few problems with this, but I do see why they put Saw 4 before Jigsaw. However, this also includes the story that started in Saw 2 with Riggs, Carey, and Matthews, and reveals Hoffman. Yes, it shows the flashbacks with Jill Tuck discovering John's traps and the lawyer, but since this is a secondary storyline, it can stay where it belongs after Saw 3. The argument Movie Web made for Saw 4, I can make for another film on this in the series. While the game in Saw 6 is set up by Hoffman and Tuck, this game is made due to the insurance company denying Kramer's claim due to his cancer. So my Saw storyline kind of looks like this: Jigsaw, Saw, Saw 10, Saw 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, final chapter, and Spiral. The reason I don't have Saw 4 and 6 before Saw is because of the Hoffman-Strom storyline. Yes, Jigsaw time jumps too. However, the main story and trap are from Jigsaw's beginning. And I'll go into a little bit of depth with that because obviously this is not going to be a 2-hour episode, and I'm okay with that. But Jigsaw is kind of the very first trap. This is the very first time John Kramer ever did a trap. And like I said, the movie time jumps, so you're going between present time and the past. But a lot of the film takes place in the past. You just don't know it until the film ends. But I love the fact that they did that. For me, Jigsaw is one of the only films in the Saw franchise. Now, I have yet to see Saw 10, so I do want to go out and see that. But it's one of the few in this franchise that I have actually gone to see in the theater multiple times because I thought the film was that good. Now, Spiral, I have never seen, but I know that it has absolutely nothing to do with the John Kramer storyline, which is why it's called Spiral and not Saw whatever. But because of that reason that I spoke in there, the Strom-Hoffman storyline, and you can even throw in Carey and Riggs and Matthews into that, which is all a story that starts in Saw 2. And then it goes through to Saw 3, Saw 4, Saw 5, and Saw 6, and even final chapter with Saw 7. Because those movies are all intertwined and they're all telling the secondary storyline, or they're all telling the main story of Hoffman and Amanda and Carey and Riggs and Strom and everybody else that ends up involved in this big, huge Jigsaw fuckery, I left that story intact. And I did that on purpose because if you split that story up to put either Saw 4 or Saw 6, which, yes, do tell a little bit more about the origin of John Kramer with the insurance company and with Jill discovering everything and all of that, with the lawyer that you actually see as one of Kramer's victims in Saw 4, yeah, you could kind of make that argument that it goes before Saw. But only those parts. But then you're splitting those movies up and you're kind of, but Saw 5 does the same thing. Saw 5 goes back in time too. So that's why I say 2 through 7, leave it where it is. But Jigsaw you can make an argument for because Jigsaw does tell that very first story. Now, why is Saw 10 in between Saw and Saw 2? Well, in every piece of marketing I've seen for it, Saw 10 takes place in between Saw and Saw 2, which is why I want to see it. John goes to Mexico to try to get help with his cancer. Now, anybody that's seen the Saw franchise, and I know I'm giving a lot away about some of the story, but I don't tell enough to ruin these movies. I'm just telling about certain characters that exist in a certain part of the Saw timeline, and that's why I'm not splitting the movies up. But John Kramer ends up with cancer somewhere before Saw 1, somewhere in this telling of the Jigsaw story, in the story that Jigsaw tells. And that's why he decided to do all the things that he's done in now fucking 9 essentially movies. Spiral is kind of there. So in between Saw and Saw 2, he goes to Mexico to try a radical treatment to try to treat his cancer. He gets fucked. And then he decides to run another trap while he's in, or another game, I guess you can call it, with the traps, while he's in Mexico. And that is why we see John Kramer in the condition he's in at the beginning of Saw 2. And then that obviously carries over into Saw 3. So that is why Saw 10 is where it is in the timeline. Now, originally, that was the last franchise I was going to talk about, but I knew that this show was going to run short. So I decided at the last minute to add Final Destination. Why? Because Final Destination is just fun. These are fun movies that in some ways are scary as hell and are obviously very gory. You can kind of consider Final Destination to kind of be like a torture porn film as well. Just because with the elaborate death scenes and things like that they did. There are 6 films in the Final Destination franchise. The first film was groundbreaking in the fact that it kind of deals with the invisible villain. But an invisible villain that everyone deals with in some way, shape, or form every day. And that is death. The Grim Reaper. The Wraith. Whatever you want to call it. In some way, shape, or form, everyone in their everyday life does eventually end up having to deal with death. And that's what made these films so good. Is you have this invisible villain, but you know that he has a plan. You know that he has a design. And by doing what the characters in the Final Destination movies do, you fuck with Death's design. Death's still going to find a way to get your ass. When your time is up, your time is up. And Death doesn't care. If you fuck his design up, he's going to find a way to come back and get you. And that's exactly what these films are. Now, I'm sure everybody that's wanted to see a Final Destination film has seen the Final Destination films. And I'm talking all 6 of them. I believe there's 6. 5. The 6th one comes out next year. I apologize. There's 5. Final Destination 1 and 2 tie into each other. They're the story of Flight 180. These kids get off these kids are all on their way traveling to Paris for a high school trip, a senior trip, I want to say it probably was. One of the kids on the plane has a premonition that the plane is going to crash. Because of this, several kids get off the plane. One of which was one of the kids' friends, somebody that had nothing to do with them, a guy and a girl that he was getting into a fight with, and then somebody that never even made it on the plane and was just rushed off the plane in all the melee, and one of their teachers. They're sitting in the airport, and sure enough, boom, the fucking plane explodes. So now what has happened is these individuals have gotten off the plane that was supposed to crash. So now, where does that leave them? Well, what ends up happening is one by one, each person that was meant to die on that airplane start dying. And the original person who had the premonition that the plane was going to crash deduces that they are all dying in the order that they were supposed to die in the crash. But since he intervened in the plane crashing, he ended up inadvertently saving their lives. So he also deduced that by him doing that and by them getting off the plane, that you can save somebody by intervening in their death again, resetting death's clock. By the end of the movie, everyone but 2 are gone. And that's the main character and his now girlfriend. Enter Final Destination 2. The girlfriend is now in a fucking insane asylum because of everything that has happened to her because of this. And she wants nothing to do with anything that has to do with that particular event. And who can fucking blame her, man? I mean, who wants to fucking die? You know? And especially by an invisible force. I mean, but, you know, like I said, 2 finishes the story of 1. And by the end of that movie, anybody associated with Flight 180 and its crashing are dead. Final Destination 3 is the first time we get to go to McKinley, which is a completely different area than Mount Abraham, which sets up the next 2 films and that storyline. So, Final Destination 4 was called The Final Destination. There will be no Final Destination movies after this. This is the last story that we're telling. Enter Final Destination 5. Final Destination 5 tells a completely different story. Has nothing to do with McKinley High. Has nothing to do with Flight 180. Has nothing to do with nothing. As we find out. Or so we think. So where am I going with this? Well, where I'm going with it is this. Final Destination 5 is a prequel. Final Destination 5 takes place before Final Destination. So basically, the story that we're getting in Final Destination 5 is the story of a company that is on a retreat. And while they're on this retreat, a bridge collapses. And obviously it's the same scenario as every other Final Destination. Somebody has a premonition, pulls a bunch of people off the bus, and they slowly start to die one by one. But what makes this interesting is that the lone survivors from everything that was happening in the story that they're telling us with this bridge collapse, they end up getting on a plane and going to Paris. What we don't know, what's turned out to be like the big shock of the movie, is that it's Flight 180. And as they're sitting on the plane, getting ready to fly to Paris to begin their new life, because new life stops death, you see everybody that got off the plane in the original movie start getting ushered off the plane because of the events that happen, and you go, oh shit, this is a fucking prequel. Like, you had no idea up to this point that this was a fucking prequel. And then you start to think back, like, holy shit, there were moments in this movie where it's just like, well, wait a minute here. And then you start to think, this has been a prequel the entire time. Holy crap, how did we not see this? What the fuck? And then when you listen to the filmmakers talk about it, they go, New Line was serious when they said that The Final Destination is the last Final Destination movie. So then all of a sudden, years later, where they're like, man, this franchise is still successful, maybe we should make another one. But we pigeonholed ourselves into saying that the last one was the last one. So you can't make a new one and start a new story because of that thing that we said. So what can we do? Go before everything that happened in the first movie and say, this is a fucking prequel. And that's exactly what they did, and it worked brilliantly. So obviously, MovieWeb's list for the Final Destination films has Final Destination 5, 1, 2, 3, The Final Destination. Do I agree with this? Definitively, yes. Because that is really the only way to tell the story. But of course, you could watch them in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat that's happening with this franchise now, too, with the addition of Final Destination 6 coming out next year. It's going to be a Max exclusive from what I'm understanding, but it is coming out. So where is that going to fall in the timeline? Because if New Line and Warner Brothers are keeping with what they said, with 4 being the final destination, that means Final Destination 6 is going to fall somewhere in the middle of this franchise. That's if they are sticking true to what they said before Final Destination 5 came out. Obviously, I don't know if that's what they're going to do. You would think that that's what they're going to do. I mean, if they were that adamant with it with 5, why wouldn't they be that adamant with it with 6? But there are new overlords at Warner Brothers New Line Cinema, and that is Discovery. So we don't know if they're going to sit there and say, hey, you know, you guys said this back then, stick to it, or if they're going to go, that was the old guys, do whatever the fuck you want. We don't know. We just don't. So that is kind of the interesting part about Final Destination 6 that is going to be coming out next year. So what were some of the honorable mentions that could have made this list? Well, obviously you have the Halloween franchise, right? The franchise that kind of started it all. Because there's a few different ways that you can do that franchise too. But again, there's also several stories that are being told there as well. So that makes it a very interesting franchise as well. But like I said, the Halloween franchise has kind of been done to death. So that's why I didn't want to mention it. But we'll break it down real quick. So obviously you have the original Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, 4, 5, and 6, H2O, Resurrection, the Rob Zombie Halloweens, and then Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Now, obviously, I haven't looked at MovieWeb's list for this one. So this will kind of just be my interpretation on this, right? And the only reason I'm throwing this one in is because, we are running a little short. I thought this might have gone a little bit longer, but not only that, but I do think that it is an honorable mention, and we could talk about it. Really, the only 2 franchises that don't get on this list that are probably some of the most popular, well, there's 3, actually, are Child's Play, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Those films kind of go in order. So there's no reason to include those on this particular show. But those are great franchises. But Halloween, due to recent history, there's been a little bit of retconning. So how would I put the Halloween franchise in order? Well, I know that they say that Halloween 2018 kind of erases Halloween 2 because of one line in Halloween 2. But I think that's forgivable. And they even make a joke about it in Halloween 2018, so that's why I say you can include it. I just remembered that, actually. So how would I do Halloween? Halloween, the original 1978. And then what the fuck? Throw Halloween 2 in there. Because Halloween 2 is actually a really good movie, and it's the continuation of that night. And then the next day. And obviously the line exists in that film where she's revealed to be Michael Myers' sister. But that, again, is kind of forgivable. And like I said, they make a joke about it in Halloween 2018. So that's the next movie I would put in the list. Boom, right there. Bam. Halloween 2018. And then obviously Halloween Kills. And unfortunately, Halloween Ends, because that does end the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers story. So you can even put in Halloween 4, 5, and 6 as kind of a in between, or maybe even like an alternate universe. Because obviously those 5 movies that I just mentioned, Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, there's a time gap in between there. And obviously the story of Halloween 4, 5, and 6 isn't the story of Laurie Strode, but it's her daughter Jamie. And there's no mention of her daughter Jamie in Halloween 2018, or Kills, or Ends. And the reason for that is because they retconned it to where those movies never happened, which also negates Halloween H2O and Resurrection. So what do you do with those movies? I don't know. This is the reason why I didn't want to include Halloween, because there's so many different storylines going on here. So, I mean, alternate dimension, but I mean, you could make an argument for Halloween 4, 5, and 6 to where maybe she did have Jamie with the, which is why they don't include Halloween 2 in that story with Halloween 2018. And obviously, John Carpenter is kind of retconning himself because John Carpenter wrote and directed Halloween 2. So he's kind of just sitting there saying, I fucked up. We're going to erase Halloween 2. Which I don't know why, because Halloween 2 is actually, like I said, it's actually a pretty good film, and you can forgive that sister storyline. Which is why they made the joke in Halloween 2018. So then what do you do with the Jamie Lloyd story? It can exist. And you can even sit there and say, Laurie had this kid, but she put it up for adoption because she didn't want Michael Myers to come after it, which is why she ends up in seclusion. But then, obviously, that completely erases everything with Halloween H2O, which Halloween H2O was a retcon in and of itself, because there's no mention of Jamie Lloyd in Halloween H2O either. So what we have is a retcon of a retcon of a retcon. the Halloween franchise is just all kinds of fucked up. So then what do you do with Rob Zombie's Halloween? Well, I'll tell you what I do with Rob Zombie's Halloween, and that's throw it out the fucking window because they're both trash. There's a lot of people that like Rob Zombie's Halloween because it gives you a backstory into the mind of Michael Myers. But it is so cliche and so... it humanizes him to where you almost sympathize with Michael Myers, and you can kind of understand why he's killing motherfuckers. I don't want that. I don't want to sympathize with Michael Myers. And I know I did this last year when I broke down the Halloween franchise, but I'm going to do it again really quick. Which is, again, another reason why I didn't want to mention the Halloween franchise, because that was the Halloween special last year. By making him poor white trash. By making him come from a broken home. By making his mom a fucking stripper. And giving him every cliche in the book as to what makes a serial killer a serial killer. But the animal mutilation, the beating up the bullies, the killing the one bully when he was younger, and then changing some of the other storyline that happened at the beginning of that film. You humanized him. You took the mysticism and the why the fuck is this dude psycho out of it, and you make people sympathize with the character of Michael Myers. And that, to me, ruins the character of Michael Myers. We all know why Jason is killing motherfuckers at a camp. We all know why Freddy Krueger haunts our nightmares. And we all know that Charles Lee Ray stuck himself in the body of a doll doing voodoo. But we don't sympathize with those characters. We're still scared to death of Freddy Krueger. Do we root for Freddy to kill motherfuckers? Yes. But we're not sitting there saying, damn, Freddy, you got a bum rap when those motherfuckers burned your ass alive because you were killing and raping children. Jason may be a little bit. Because not only did Jason drown because 2 camp counselors were fucking and not paying attention, but then one of those same not one of the same camp counselors that were responsible for his drowning, but a camp counselor killed his mother. In some versions, right in front of him. In others, not so much. And then Chucky was just a fucking bad motherfucker to begin with, and he didn't want to die, so he voodooed himself into a fucking doll. We root for those characters because they're cool. We don't root for the characters because it's like, damn, bro, you got a bum rap. Your mom's a whore. And she takes her clothes off for money. Probably sucks dick for money too. But, I mean, we don't know that because they never mention that. But, you know, your mom's also dating a dickhead that makes fun of you. And treats your mom like shit. And not only is your mom a whore, but your sister's a whore too. That didn't want to take you trick-or-treating. And you get bullied at school. Kind of feel sorry for you. And then your mom commits suicide. Your other sister goes up for adoption because obviously there's nobody left to take care of her. And you find out who she is. How, I don't know. But you find out who she is and where she's living. And then you go and kill all of her friends and her foster parents and everybody else to get to the bitch. That is my problem with Rob Zombie's Halloween. And then Halloween 2 is just a god-awful mess. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is just a god-awful mess. That movie sucks and makes zero sense. And I'm so glad that it bombed. And I'm so glad that people hated that movie to the point to where Dimension looks at Rob Zombie and be like, dude, you ain't touching Michael Myers again. Get the fuck out. And then he actually went off and made some good movies in 31 and 3 from Hell. Few stinkers in between, but 31 and 3 from Hell were good. But I actually ended up going closer to 2 hours than I originally anticipated. But most of that is because I decided to do Halloween. So, yeah, that changed things up just a little bit with how the show ended. But there it is, man. The 2023 All Hallows Eve Spook-Tacular. We are back here at the entrance of the graveyard.
Real slow.
So, with that said, let's go ahead and just cut it here. It's been great to do this show. I feel redeemed a little bit by doing this special. It's Friday the 13th, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and watch some Friday the 13th movies, because what better to do on Friday the 13th than watch Jason Voorhees, I should say, kill a bunch of motherfuckers, right? Anyway, hopefully everybody out there has a great and safe Samhain and All Hallows Eve season. And when will I be back? I don't know. But I'm definitely taking care of myself, and that's the most important thing. So finally trying to get some answers, getting answers, but they're coming slowly. So hopefully the next time you guys see me, I'll be even a few more pounds lighter, because I'm dropping weight like crazy, and I can't believe it. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, until next time.
Money's Crazy Mind is proud to be the exclusive flagship broadcast of Nameless, Faceless Productions.
That's all, folks.